Welcome to the Lotco Business Podcast, a show all about helping you as a retailer, brand, or creative understand the actual business side of running your business. I offer straightforward, practical advice about the nitty-gritty of making money from your creative passion. We will be covering bite-sized business and marketing lessons, as well as interviews with experts and trailblazers in the fashion, homewares, and design industries. My name is Melissa Robbins. I'm a business coach, colour-loving, non-coffee drinking Melburnian. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome to today's podcast. My name is Melissa Robbins. I have a special guest here with me today, and I'm super excited to have him join us because I spoke about getting him on the podcast a little while ago, and it's taken a while. So here today we have Dr. Ben Robbins, who is a clinical psychologist, and he's going to share lots of insights with us today. Thank you so much for joining me here, Ben.
Thanks, Melissa. I've heard great things.
Now, this is going to be a bit weird. So as I did mention in my previous podcast that we are married, and so this is a bit weird.
We definitely are. Yeah.
Having the podcast interview is strange because it is, obviously things that we do talk about this sort of information, but sharing it with everyone else, I think it is something that lots of clients that you may know that I work with, product-based businesses, and I work with them on strategy, on, actions and tactics and things to focus on in their business to help them grow. One thing that comes up again and again, and one thing that I've started to notice, a little while ago, was the way that the mindset that people have, the way they speak to themselves, and the way that they go about their business has a huge impact. So the things that I know that you work on and you work on with your clients, I think could be really relevant here. So one of the topics that we want to touch on today is mental fitness and what that actually means. Could you, first of all, maybe just explain a little bit about what sort of work you do?
Right, thank you. Thanks for having me on your show. What do I do? So I work with a few different groups. Primarily, my job is in professional sport. So I work as a psychologist for an AFL team, the Essendon Bombers. If there's any fans out there. And I've worked in pro sport for about 10 years. I was also a player, so played in the AFL. So I bring sort of the experience as a player and then my study as a clinical psych, helping the players with their performance and their well-being and certainly their mindset. Also working, clinical practice, individual clients, and similar things, mental health, working with anxiety, mood, these sorts of things. Now, in terms of who's listening to your podcast, I don't know, maybe they see a clear link between what they're trying to do and what's happening in pro sport, but probably most don't. But all I would say is everyone's got a brain, everyone's got a mind, and they all work in really similar and predictable ways, especially under pressure. And so the pressure of a game for the players I work with, big crowd, 100,000, the MCG. Okay, it's a different pressure to the ones that, a small business owner will be facing clearly, but the impact on your brain and your body is exactly the same. And so I work with our players, help them understand their brains, understand their minds, understand how to work with thoughts, how to work with emotions to perform to your potential. I think what was the question? Was that a question? There was a question. Oh, what's mental fitness? So look, it's not, I wouldn't say this is a term defined in the literature necessarily, but here's how we define it at the footy club and with the athletes I work with. It's the ability to stay in contact with the present moment, regardless of what's happening around you, regardless of your environmental factors or what's happening internally. So how are you thinking? How are you feeling? So regardless of what's happening externally, internally, you're able to stay in the moment and you're able to act in ways that is helpful or that are in line with your personal values or in line with what the situation demands. Okay, so what's going to be helpful here? I'm experiencing this stress. I'm experiencing this pressure. What's going to be a helpful way for me to act? And you might look at that and think, oh, that's pretty easy. It's very easy to say. It is very difficult to do. You're in the storm. You're in the midst of it, whatever that stress or pressure is, whether at work or at home. And so working with, my clients to help them become mentally fitter and to be able to manage those moments just a little bit better.
Okay, so what sort of things do you do to help them get?
So we talk skills, really, and you think physical fitness, you go to the gym, you do your bench press, or you go run a few laps of the oval, or you go to, cycle class, or whatever it is you're doing for your physical fitness. And you go twice a week, and over time, you'll notice changes in your body, in your cardiovascular fitness, in, you notice these physical changes.
Results. You get results.
Yeah. So long as you consistently practice, so you consistently train. As soon as you stop training, your body will revert back and you'll lose fitness. So this is how we frame mental fitness is, okay, this is something that can be trained, your mindset, your psychology, but it takes work. It's hard at times. It's not much fun at times. But if you practice these skills, which I think we're going to talk about, if we practice some of these skills consistently, you will become mentally fitter and you're able to manage life's shit. Do we swear on here? I don't know. Do we normally do that? Anyway.
It's fine. It's
right.
okay.
As the shit of life comes at you, you're just all right. You can't change so much of what's happening around you in life. So much of the things that grab our attention and impact our emotions and the way we think, that's out of our control. So we focus, certainly in professional sport, we focus on what's in our control, which is how we respond. When the thing happens, how do I respond to this in a way that's going to be helpful to me? Life's hard enough. We don't want to make it any harder by us responding to our environment in, ways that make life more difficult. So
what are some of the ways people respond? Reactive, I guess you could say.
Well, think about, let's just use our home life here. Hope you don't mind. Think about when I can't remember a password, all right? Oh, I've got some sort of IT issue. I don't typically respond, or sometimes I respond okay, but often I'll respond, and you've seen this, like pretty unhelpfully. I get pretty worked up. Why is life so difficult? Why do we have so many passwords? Why do they have to be like, right? And I can get quite agitated.
You escalate.
Yeah, fair to say, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a really small thing, but it can be, you're stuck in traffic. You're late for a meeting. You get an email off a client that makes you upset. Your kid says something like, our son, whose bedroom I'm broadcasting from here, he doesn't unpack the dishwasher, even though I've asked him 17 times. Like, you feel like you just starts to feel that sense of distress, agitation, emotional intensity starting to lift, right? So in these moments, this is where you need awareness, all right? Awareness that you're starting to enter into an unhelpful state. Without getting into the neuroscience too much, like part of your brain that regulates behavior and guides you, problem solves, logic, reason, all those sorts of things, our prefrontal cortex right through here, that can be really hard to access when we're in this sort of emotional state, and it can be hard to make clear decisions. So we talk a lot with our players about them finding ways when they're noticing these sorts of emotions coming up for them to ground themselves in the present, take a breath, feel your feet on the ground, or just notice some of your surroundings, whatever it is, before you do or say something. Just take a deep breath. Observe what's happening for you and then proceed. Proceed in a helpful way. Again, let's come back to this concept of let's do stuff that's going to help us rather than stuff that's making life more difficult. And you may relate to this if you've ever said or done something, oh, I wish I could take that back. I wish I didn't say that thing or do that thing. And like, as we know, once it's done and you can't have it back. So we want to just get a little bit better at two things: noticing that internal state, awareness, and then part two, having the psychological skills to work through those challenging moments.
And I think for a lot of my clients in particular, they're probably balancing the home life or trying to run a business. They've got maybe have young kids. They're trying to do lots of different things. So it's like, as you say, being being present where they are at that time and being more focused on reactions to things too, because I think, when you're managing a lot of different things too, you're juggling a lot of things, you can easily get to that sort of stress point quite quickly.
Absolutely. Your cup can get filled really quickly. And often it's not we have cups here, and as we go through our day, we have an argument in the morning with one of your kids, or you're a bit late out of the house, and then you get that challenging email, and then you're stuck in traffic, and you have a interaction with a customer that's upsetting, and then it can be the smallest thing that sort of tips us over the edge. Our cup overflows. And so it really is, again, some awareness of how you're feeling and how you're thinking, and then noticing that and making adjustments to your course of behavior, your course of action, in order to empty that cup before it overflows.
Okay, so you've talked about some of the things obviously that cause the issues, or cause you to react in the first place and stuff. What are some things that you can do or people can do? And we want to get into some other areas as well. So I know you can't, dive into every sort of managed tool that you've got to do this, but what are some things that help improve your mental fitness?
All right. I think we'll just talk about two things. I'll cover off mindfulness first, because I think this is a key skill. And this is, I'm certain everyone's heard of this term, but it's your ability to stay focused on the present moment. That's part one of the definition. Part two is the attitude you bring while you are staying focused on the present moment, which is being curious and non-judgmental about your experience. You're just noticing what's happening around you, and you're noticing what's happening inside of you. And this is absolutely a skill. It's something that we spend a lot of time training with our players, their ability to stay focused on task, like keep our attention on task. Think of attention like a spotlight, and that spotlight can shift around during our day to hundreds of different things in our day, our tasks, our worries, our anxieties, our future, our past. And the skill of holding your attention on the one thing that you want it to be on at any particular time is incredibly important, but so bloody difficult to do. I use this example. Our son Charlie, who is a great kid. He's a talkative kid. He certainly was as a primary school kid. And he'd come home from school, and I'd ask him about his day, and how was school today, mate? And he would tell us, but in excruciating detail. I know he's a high schooler now, so it's a long time ago, but just like literally everything he'd done for the whole day, right? And like, brilliant, we love that. But really trying to hold that spotlight on him while other thoughts come into your mind of, got to cook dinner, what's our daughter doing, I've got to call that player back, I've got that email to answer, all this busy shit that goes on in our lives. And then, our phones, I just got a text message in, I forgot to put it on silent, and so that grabs my attention. And as Charlie's talking to me, here's me day, and then I did this, and then me and Angus did this, and I'm looking at my phone, checking that message I got, and Charlie's, Dad, are you listening? And the truth is, no, I'm not. I'm not listening, even though he's talking to me. All right. And that harms our relationship. That hurts mine and Charlie's relationship, because why do we want to listen to somebody when we know they're not really listening? Why do we want to have a conversation with somebody when we know they're not really listening to us? He'll stop telling us about his day because we're not listening. I'm not listening. And that's not the sort of relationship I want to have with my son. So it's, again, that spotlight. When Charlie walks in the door from school, I'm going to hold it on him. I'm going to keep it there and really listen to him. And then that's part one of the skill. Part two is when I inevitably wander off, and I will, it's noticing I've wandered and bringing it back as quick as I can, rather than just our mind off, daydreaming, mind wandering as it tends to do.
Absolutely. No, I was just going to say, like, you notice that, like, if you're out to dinner with someone or you're in a group, and then, if three people are on their phone, it's like, well, do you even want to hear the conversation, or are you listening to me? Like, it can come into everyday life so much more now, the phone element of it all, and how you miss opportunities to connect with people if you are, your attention's elsewhere.
And the world we live in is really working against us here, because how many things are vying? And for your people listening, think of it, how many things are vying for your attention, even right now. Like your phones, all screens, TVs, computers, phones, the people in our life, our relationships, our parents, our kids, our partners, our friends, and then our work, the balance sheet, the challenges with customers. We're a world of distraction, and it's so hard to pay attention. And that is why it's got to be trained. You got to train your attention. It's the only way to get better at this stuff. Telling yourself to pay attention is not enough, especially under pressure.
Yeah. So it's the practicing mindfulness that's going to start helping with that.
Yeah. In pro sport, we refer to it as like training your attention, rather than, there's a bit of stigma around, say, like a meditation or a mindfulness. So which I don't know why that is. It can tend to be. So we tend to talk about it, certainly at the footy club I work out, as attention training. You're training your attention. You're training your ability to pay attention to a thing, which is what we need our players to be able to do when they're out playing the game. They can't get pulled into the future. We don't want them dwelling on mistakes. Play it out, play this, stay in the moment. And so, attention training through meditation, through mindfulness practices, that's absolutely something we focus on.
All right, so that was part one. What was the other area that you were going to mention, like the other way to train?
Well, I mean, there's lots of things you can do in order to train your psychology or to become mentally fitter. The two that we focus on largely, there's three. Visualization is the third. We won't touch on that today, but we talk about this inner dialogue you have with yourself.
That is what I originally said I was going to get you to focus on. So that is definitely what a lot of people were like, I really want to hear about this. What does it mean to have negative self-talk? What are, limiting beliefs? And I guess align that with that, when you mentioned about meditation, mindfulness, what might have come up for some people there as well is that I'm no good at meditation. I can't do this. I've tried it before. I'd just love you to share more about the negative self-talk and limiting beliefs and stuff.
We can train our inner dialogue to be more helpful. This does not mean blind positivity and not seeing situations for what they are. So when we go through something distressful, I just think positive. No. When distressing shit happens, it's distressful, and we're going to experience emotions, and that's okay. That's part of being human. But what we are talking about here is when something goes wrong, we're able to take perspective and frame that situation in the most helpful way possible. What we talk about, rather than positive self-talk, it's balanced self-talk, objective self-talk, optimistic self-talk, these concepts, rather than blind positivity. Because what we tend to do as humans is we've got a loud inner critic. This is this voice that's constantly in our ear telling us we're not good enough and you're a failure and you're letting people down and you're not enough and you don't belong. And, it'll be different for everybody, but it's similar things, right? Now, there's a lot of opportunity in pro sport for this voice to be really overwhelming because, in the AFL, there's a lot of mistakes. In every game, there's hundreds of mistakes. We make them all the time. Our players make them all the time. And if they get bogged down with mistakes and that inner critic gets really loud, that's going to take away from their performance because that's grabbing their attention. Go back to what we were talking about a moment ago. That's grabbing their attention, and we need their attention on the important stuff that's going to help them play the game. So it's really important in game, but it's probably even more important just to their general well-being or to our general well-being, because we're generally our own biggest critic. Okay, we highlight our own flaws and inadequacies. These are perceptions. They're not based in fact or truth most of the time. We have a negativity bias, which means our brain is attracted to and wants to deal with the negatives in our world, whether perceived or real, as a priority. Why? It's a survival mechanism. It's an evolutionary trait we have, very important to the caveman 10,000 years ago to be able to notice negatives in their world and deal with them. If they didn't notice threats or negatives in their world, they would probably die because the predator would eat them.
Mm-hmm.
So the humans that survived that world were very good at spotting the threats and locating the negatives in their environment. Fast forward to our modern day, we're still very good at noticing the threats and noticing the negatives in our environment. The problem is that there's the life and death threats. They don't really exist anymore, other than very unique circumstances, obviously. But we're not getting chased by saber-tooth tigers down the street. Our threats and our negatives are social, emotional threats, work threats, financial threats, relationship threats, health threats. None of these can be solved. Our fight and flight response, which was developed in order to deal with those threats. Anxiety, we can't run away or fight relationships or work. They're there. We're going to deal with them in a modern world. So our self-talk tends to be much more negative than positive. Some research tells us like 7-1, 7 negatives for every positive that we might tell ourselves. And so what we're trying to do is just get a bit more balance into that. Like just see situations or yourself and the beliefs you hold about yourself with a bit more objectivity. One way we do this is if you think about if you've messed something up, if you've made a mistake, often what we tend to do is, oh, Ben, you idiot. You're hopeless. Why you always mess stuff like this up, right? That's where our mind automatically goes at inner critic. And what that can do is, it's very damaging to our mental health. It's damaging to our performance, to our attention, obviously, grabs our attention, takes our attention away from the important stuff. And so we want to instead develop more adaptive ways of talking to ourselves when that mistake happens. For example, I'm learning, I'm improving. It's normal to make mistakes. It's okay to feel stressed, sad, lonely, insert emotion, whatever it is, in this situation. I've been here before. I can work through this. I know I've got the capability. That didn't work out, but what do I take out of it? See how that language, it's much more balanced. It's much more helpful than that loud inner critic, which for most of us has been around for our whole lives. So it's ingrained. It's right in there. It's habitual. It's where we go automatically. And so to come back to mindfulness helps us with awareness of when we're doing that and that, okay, is there another way to see this situation? Is there a different perspective? And the way we do it, I feel like I'm talking a lot here, but I assume that's the point of what we're doing. But the way we do it is if your best friend or child just made the same mistake that you did, what would you tell them? And if you would tell them, oh, you're hopeless, you don't belong, you're letting your family down, you always mess this stuff up. Like, it's unlikely we would talk to those people like that. We'd be much more compassionate. And so this is really what you're doing with your self-talk. We're trying to be much more compassionate to ourselves. We're good at compassion to others typically. If we see somebody upset, we'll whack an arm around them and what can I do? Can I help? We are not very good at doing that back towards ourselves. And so that is what the skill is. It's actually giving yourself a break, understand that you're doing your best with what you got, with the resources available to you at any moment. And by doing this, what you're actually you're able to work through stuff far more effectively and more quickly and more helpfully and get where you want to go. Because certainly in my world, I can't speak to everybody listening, but in my world, lots of shit goes wrong in a game of footy and in a week of footy, and we're just got to do our best with this. We're just got to deal with it, and that's what the situation is. We can be upset about it, but if I stay in that upset, emotional, angry, stuck place, that's not taking me. That's not taking me where I want to go. To come back to our definition of mental fitness, that's not what the situation demands. The situation demands that I act like this. Okay, well, I'm going to try and do that. But you need these psychological skills that enable you to do that. Right.
So I was just going to ask, is one of the first things to try and do is be aware of the way you're speaking to yourself, like, make notes or sort of start to pick up on patterns of things that you are saying and reframe as you say. So it's like, that is just like that first step of, trying to remove, or as you say, edit the negative self-talk into, what did you say, neutral or?
Well, just a bit more optimistic. Yeah, we like optimism's a great quality. We like to bring in where we can. Because typically what we do is we go into the future, we project it, we take that spotlight and we project it into the future, and we catastrophize that it won't work out. As you know, I'm very good at doing that, right? And that's okay. It's a problem. It's our brain trying to help us, is trying to problem solve for us and prepare us, and we need to do that. But if we're doing it every time and we're doing it unhelpfully, and that catastrophic outcome, it rarely actually happens. And we've created all this distress for us in the present just because we've projected our mind forward to the future. So we want to bring, rather than pessimism, which again, we're very good at typically, we want to bring a sense of optimism, and not unfounded optimism, like credible optimism. Okay, what if this does work out? Rather than, no, this definitely won't work out, and here's why. But to come back to your question, the starting point is awareness. And an exercise that I've done, with people at times, is just to write down some of your thoughts. Just maybe get to the end of your day and write down, try and notice some stuff you've thought during the day, especially when that inner critic's got really loud. Do a bit of an audit. How are you talking to yourself? All right. And then part 2 of that exercise is, how do I want to talk to myself? And again, go back to, what would you tell your best friend or your child or your partner if they were experiencing the same thing? That might help. Because we're much more balanced with others. And so write a few of those down, and then, okay, next time this inner critic stuff shows up, what about if you could talk to yourself in a much more compassionate, helpful way? And then over time, through the beauty of neuroplasticity, which is our brain's ability to rewire itself, you'll find that more automatically, more habitually, you go to this more helpful inner dialogue rather than this inner critic, which has dominated, most of our lives.
That's very helpful. And just on that as well, like I touched on before, that I guess it sort of taps into the same thing, like that limiting beliefs or growth mind, like fixed mindset, whereas you talk to yourself like, oh, I'm no good at tech, or you've never been good at that, or, like we talk about our kids and stuff, saying that, oh, I'm no good at maths. Well, like, what are some things that people do say, and how do you move forward from that as well?
Yeah, so growth, fixed mindset, it's really about the beliefs you hold about yourself and your sort of capabilities. Use the example, our kids, they have 2 grandmas, and both grandmas get an iPhone. They get an iPhone for Christmas. One grandma, fixed mindset, oh, technology, I'm no good. I won't be able to work this out. This will be beyond me. Charlie, Ella, you'll have to teach me how to use it. Grandma 2, well, I'm not especially, tech savvy, but I'll have a crack and I'll just try and work it out, and I'll read the thing on the instructions, and, I'll just play around with it and see how I go. Which of those 2 grannies are going to learn the iPhone and become proficient at the iPhone? Obviously the second one. They've both got the same level of capability, but it's the beliefs you hold about what you can and can't do that dictates how well you learn, how well you perform. I mean, you can do I don't want to sound like Tony Robbins here, the American motivational speaker, but you can do anything. Like, not, Kobe Bryant on the wall here, Charlie's wall here. Like, maybe can't play in the NBA, but you can get better at basketball. Like, you can. How much better? Well, depends how much time and effort you're willing to put in, but we can all get better at everything. But so much comes from what we tell ourselves and the beliefs we hold. Because the other thing that beliefs do is we'll stick at stuff longer. I'm not very good at this yet. I can get better at this. I'll keep working at this. I'm not getting the results that I'm after just yet, but I'm improving. Versus people with a fixed mindset are often very hesitant to have a go at things that they're not good at or that they're unsure about. Why? Because failing says something about them as a person. Oh, if I fail at this, it says something about my worth, my self-worth, right? Whereas the person with a growth mindset is like, well, I may fail, but failure is an incredibly important part of growth and development. If you're not failing, you are not pushing yourself. You should be failing at stuff. And so this is absolutely something that we spend a lot of time on with our footballers, is if they're just nailing training all the time, they're not going hard enough. They're not testing themselves. You should be failing, because that's where the growth lies, in that zone of failure, because you're pushing right to the limits. And so that's where we want to reframe what failure is. It's to use a footy cliche, it's just an opportunity for growth. We lose a game, we learn something about it. We don't play well, what do we learn out of that? What would we do differently next time? The fixed mindset person is not interested in failing because it's too big a threat to their, self-identity, who they are. And that's all of us at times. But this is, again, something with awareness.
Yeah. Oh, and that's what I always talk about, your growth happens outside your comfort zone. So it's sort of like being prepared to fail, being prepared to not be good at things when you first start. And, everyone has small improvements to make, and you can definitely get better the more you practice it. And as you say, you're more willing to persist if you know that there's a possibility that you can get better at things.
Absolutely.
So Ben, I know you work with, obviously, athletes. Who else do you work with and help with this mental fitness?
Probably two different groups. First is individual clients. So whether that's, work with some Olympic athletes right through to junior athletes, high school kids typically, who maybe have some ability but might be struggling with, elements of anxiety, perfectionism, in particular as you're growing up, 15, 16, 17, you're coming to the pointy end of, particularly in my sport in the AFL, like that's when players get drafted. And so there's big stakes for the kids. And so that can be pretty overwhelming. So that group, and then probably the other main group I work with is corporates or schools, training them, teaching them these sort of human-centric skills, these psychological skills, blue-collar organisations where there's a lot of technical knowledge is held, checklists and how to do things, in the correct way. So technically, employees might get a lot of training. But as we know, just because you've got the technical training, it doesn't mean the skill or the task they're trying to complete gets done properly. Because we are humans and we are subject to human factors like distraction, like emotion, like negative thoughts. Okay, and so I work with corporate groups, and particularly blue-collar workforces, to help them with their skills of attention, their skills of emotion regulation, their skills of compassion, self-compassion, all designed to help them, well, twofold really, to help their mental health, which all of these skills will do, but also their performance in whatever domain it is. So that work in particular is really fascinating, and different organisations I work with, the challenges they face. Okay, again, the environmental challenges are slightly different to the ones in a professional sporting environment. But as I said at the start, the impacts on our brains are exactly the same, and how we respond to pressure and stress is really predictable. And so you can work in these environments, understand them, and help people navigate the challenges within their environments as effectively as possible.
And another thing just on that is, you mentioned mental health there. So can you just touch on a little bit about, like you've mentioned before to me, like the continuum, or, where people sit? Like, it's not like you've got poor mental health or you don't. Like, can you just touch on that?
Yeah, so we see mental health on a continuum. We move up and down this continuum from maybe mentally healthy through to mentally ill, all right? And we're up and down it based upon, a whole range of factors, our biology, our genetics, our own psychology, our environment, our social networks and groups, our workplace, all of the factors that make us human. These impact how our mental health is. And so we move up and down the continuum. And so, we use this to destigmatize challenges with mental health because we're all on there somewhere. We're all on that continuum. And sometimes we'll be low on that continuum because we're dealing with a lot. Other times life will be going along okay and we're feeling much more healthier. And so it's just, again, awareness of where you might sit on the continuum and using our psychological skills, along with a range of other things like the ability to solve problems and make changes to our environment where we can, but working with our internal systems, internal mechanisms, our own psychology to be as mentally healthy as we possibly can. And so, again, those two skills we've covered today, mindfulness and our self-talk, both of those will help our mental health.
All right, thank you. That's awesome. So if someone wanted to, work on their mental fitness, they wanted to hear about some of the other skills that you have touched on but haven't gone into too much detail with today, you do have a short program which people can take, which, is working on improving their mental fitness, as well as, people can get in touch if they want to, have you come and speak at the workplace or have you speak in schools and stuff like that too, or, work with private clients. But yeah, everyone can find out the information. I'll put it in the show notes, but it's Dr. Ben Robbins, and then on Instagram, Dr. Ben Robbins as well. All right, thank you so much for sharing today. I hope that it has helped a few people just understand a little bit more about their negative self-talk, ways that they're speaking to themselves, awareness of what, may be impacting their day-to-day or what may be impacting their mental health, as well as some skills for them to practice and start working on to improve their mental fitness. I will definitely link some things in the show notes to help people. And if people want to find out more, just get in touch.
Thanks very much for having me. I feel like I didn't have that much choice in the matter, but nevertheless, hopefully somebody's found it interesting. But if you've got this far, well done.
All right. Thank you so much. Yep. All good. All right. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Lotco Business Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure you subscribe to receive future episodes as they are released. And I'd be so grateful for a review on Apple Podcast. If you would like a copy of the show notes or any of the links mentioned today, please jump onto my website at thelotco.com.au/podcast. Have an amazing week, and I look forward to chatting to you again soon.